Oh, what's this?
Oh, hello.
We commission 4 artists to create a piece of work based on forgotten journeys of 4 19th century ships.
My problem is I have no idea how she looks like.
No, wait, what?
Ships that forever changed the history of Singapore.
There's a dramatic change in Singapore's history.
It was a big adventure, really.
My name is Farizwan Fajari, professionally known as Script Cryptic, and I'm an artist. So most of the work that I do is in black and white because I'm sort of partially colorblind. I'm a Singaporean Malay of Burmese descent, so a lot of my work is really based on my own cultural heritage along with my own social identities. It's really just coming from my own immediate environment, from my own subconscious, anything that kind of resonates with me. Sir, in March 1837, the first armed steamship, the Diana, sailed into Singapore on a mission to protect the port and rid the surrounding waters of pirates. It is now your mission, good sir, to uncover the story of the Diana and to create a new work of art from your discoveries. But take heed, the internet may not provide you counsel, for that will be too easy. Good luck, yours respectfully, the Commissioner. I have no idea what the Diana is. Or pirates, except for the ones that you see in the movies. To be honest, I don't really know where to start. So I'm just drawing like my idea of what a pirate would look like, with the stereotypical bandana and the eye patch. And this is like my idea of a steamship. This is just based on assumptions, and it's pretty silly at this point.
My expertise on the matter is about as reliable as a sinking ship. If I'm going to make a work about a real ship from 1837, I'm going to need some watertight facts.
So I've been commissioned to do a work on the Diana, and the problem is I have no idea what the Diana is, except for the fact that it's an armed steamship sent here to fight against pirates.
One thing to bear in mind with the Diana is she's a steamship and she's a wooden ship.
Right.
So it's sort of an old and a new technology put together.
So how rampant was piracy?
Piracy really was a problem in the region, and one of the ways that we can see this is if we look at press accounts at the time.
Piracy, atrocious piracies, more atrocious piracies.
This is from 1835, where you've got 2 accounts of ships that were attacked by pirates.
1 Phuket captured, 25 or 26 missing, supposed to have all been murdered. 1 sampan with 10 persons, among whom were 1 woman and 1 child, captured and all murdered.
Well, sounds pretty violent.
It certainly does. So this, as you can see, was quite a big problem for the merchants in Singapore.
So what kind of impact did the Diana have on Singapore?
Well, it had an impact because one of the things you've got is the arrival of the steamship. It's well armed. And what it's quite famous for is one of the very first encounters with pirates.
Donna shares that in May 1838, the Diana came upon 6 large pirate boats. Thinking the Diana was a ship on fire and therefore easy prey, the pirates fired upon her, only for her to sail against the wind and pour upon them a destructive fire.
So they're really encountering something that was much more formidable. Around the 1860s, 1870s, the general consensus is by that point there was greater control over the waters and at least less attacks at sea.
So is it fair to say that the Diana helped Singapore flourish as a port?
I would say so, yes.
Thank you, and good night.
I was quite surprised to learn about the violence that happened in the sea. But at the same time, not so surprised because, they were pirates, right? So it did feel like the Diana kick-started a revolution of sorts, where it was instrumental in eradicating piracy. It was quite an eye-opener, I would say, for sure. The most visual striking thing for me was when Donna shared to me the story about Diana's first encounter with the pirates. So I'm just gonna use that as a starting point. My work is presented in many different forms, usually paintings, also murals, but they've also been presented as performance pieces and more sculptural-based work.
For this one, I'm thinking of creating a landscape painting of that epic first battle. But I'm still missing one crucial bit of information. How in the world did the Diana actually look like? I've been commissioned to make a work on the Diana, the first armed steamship sent to Singapore in 1837. I now know more about the Diana's mission to protect Singapore's waters, so it's high time I find out how she actually looked like.
So, Brian, I'm doing a work based on the Diana, but my problem is I have no idea how she looks like.
Actually, she kind of looked like a sand barge. Here she is right here, right in the foreground.
Right.
Rather small, unprepossessing paddle steamer.
Right.
And that distinctive smokestack sticking up.
Brian says that the Diana was a British ship, originally built in 1823 in Calcutta. She had 2 engines, which rotated paddle wheels on her sides. And being one of the earliest steamships, she was made of wood and still had sails.
She's so small, I didn't expect her to be that small.
So, although this is the smallest and least potent of the ships in terms of her firepower, she had the great advantage of the engine. Could move any time. That changed everything.
Yeah.
In fact, I learned that the Diana hardly carried weapons at all. Just one medium-sized cannon and a small boat she would tug along that would be packed with armed men. But that didn't make her any less deadly, as the local pirates learned.
But the key again is that she could move. It's an unequal contest.
Right.
So she inflicts tremendous damage on, kills quite a few pirates.
Right.
What is interesting in all of this, though, is not so much the military confrontation between Diana and the pirates. It's the context that brought her there in the first place. So you follow the money.
Right.
Brian explains that there was great interest by Britain and merchants in Singapore to expand their trade up to Borneo, to the Philippines, and of course, to China.
And the problem is that what they call pirates, these river-based peoples in Borneo, are interfering with this traffic. It's a clash of worlds. It's the world of British sea power and the Industrial Revolution and capital-driven global trade colliding with the world of the Borneo river peoples who have been there forever.
So, after talking to Brian, Diana's campaign against piracy didn't really sit well with me. Especially after learning the Diana was also there for British colonial expansion, which to me, in my mind, is never a good thing, right? And I think moving forward, my approach will probably be of someone who's a bit more skeptical, you know what I mean? So I have a clear idea of what the Diana actually looked like. So for me right now, it's just trying to figure out what makes the Diana, and then trying then to simplify the ship itself. But the thing is, talking to Brian, I kind of put a little twist into the entire story.
As I start preparing the materials I need for the final work, I can't help but wonder, was the Diana really the hero in the story, and the pirates the villains? If I'm going to make a work about pirates, I need to know their side of the story.
So who are these pirates?
Well, I think let's start by looking at the term pirate itself. Nobody is born a pirate. You're labeled a pirate. So the whole war on piracy was basically an excuse, a pretext to further Western colonial power in Southeast Asia. And those who resisted, by default, became their enemies and were labeled pirates.
So who were these communities labeled as pirates around Singapore that the Diana would have encountered?
Now, the people who were labeled pirates were mainly Southeast Asian communities that had a long history of being mariners, living at sea.
Communities, Farish says, such as the Orang Laut and the Bugis traders living on and around Singapore, the Ilanuns of the Philippines, and the Sea Dayaks from Borneo. And it is in these images that we can also see the same colonial mindset.
They're all armed men. We never see any women. So you get this idea that somehow all they do is fight.
Right.
They are savages, they are cannibals, they're headhunters, or in this case, they're pirates. And this is why we have to come to save them. It's the language of conquest.
Farish shows me more images. The vessels these so-called pirates would have used, and the weaponry they would have armed themselves with. Cuirasses, spears, maybe one or two small cannons. Modest armaments that could not have saved them from Britain's grasp.
So by the time we get to the mid-19th century, we begin to see these enormous power differentials. Here we have the image of the British steam gunboat basically blasting its way left, right, and center.
This image, Farish tells me, is of the invasion of Brunei on the island of Borneo. While the steamship in the image was not the Diana, it remains a haunting example of how steamships like the Diana were used by Britain to conquer trade routes around Southeast Asia.
The Diana in its time was a weapon of mass destruction. So the sad fate of Brunei is the sad fate shared by many Southeast Asian nations, because there is no way that Southeast Asians can fight this kind of technology.
Right. So after meeting with Farish, I think what was problematic to me was the absence of humanity in this campaign against piracy, and how they were just, killing almost indiscriminately. One can't help but empathize with the pirates. It must have been, horrifying, I would bet. So basically, after talking to Farish and being presented with a set of images of pirates back in the day, I decided to sort of create my own version of what a pirate might look like.
Making characters is a huge part of what I do. They inhabit almost everything that I create.
These characters are actually based on my own struggle with trying to find out who I am and who I'm not, of the things I feel and my reaction towards that kind of feelings. It's like writing a diary of sorts. So instead of words, I would sort of transform these emotions into symbols and different characters.
My first step is to see if I can neutralize these colonial images and portray the pirates in a different way.
So I remove the spears, remove the shields, remove any signs of aggression.
In other words, how would a pirate look like if I were to take the pirate out of him? I've been commissioned to create an artwork on the Diana, Singapore's first anti-piracy steamship from 1837. I'm now attempting to create my own version of pirates from the colonial references that I have. But the more I draw them, the more these pirates start looking like the same characters I've been drawing all these years.
I think this has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of my work is really inspired by images and symbols from the Malay world.
Because I come from the Malay world, and so did these pirates.
It feels like these pirates are telling the same stories that I've been trying to tell.
My journey can't end here. I have to find out more about who these pirates were, who they really were. From someone who comes from their community, who can tell me their point of view once and for all.
So I understand that you are a descendant of the Orang Laut.
Yes, I believe so.
You believe so?
My paternal grandma identified herself as a suku Kalang. So this Kalang River, they used to have like settlements just by the river. My paternal granddad is a Orang Laut suku Bintan. Very heroic clan of Orang Laut seafarers. So I grew up with a lot of stories about the bravery of the Orang Laut.
Sure.
But then when I went to school, it was like pirates. Like
So my own knowledge of the Orang Laut is actually quite limited, and the stuff that I hear about the Orang Laut is not actually quite favorable.
Other stereotypes include them being uncivilized, barbaric. So that drove me to find out more about my heritage. Were they really pirates? No, that was really the big question I had.
Sharon reveals he had spent years studying both colonial and Orang Laut history. And what he's discovered paints a very different picture from the stereotypes he grew up with.
This really shows you Orang Laut, Malay houses of that period.
It turns out that the Orang Laut have been around for centuries, roaming the waters of the Malay archipelago as the naval forces of the old Malay kings of Malacca and Johor. Their duties included defending their waters, collecting taxes and tributes from incoming vessels, and of course, executing raids on enemy ships.
It's quite interesting for me to actually discover that the Orang Laut could be seen as protectors, rather than just pirates.
Definitely, they were protecting our waters.
Yeah.
But Sharom then tells me things fell apart in the late 17th century when their king, Sultan Mahmud Shah, was assassinated and the Orang Laut fractured into smaller factions.
They were, I would put it as something like a civil war. So when the British came, this place is almost like a war zone. It worked well for the colonialists actually, that there's no one center of power.
So in 1837, with the arrival of the Diana, I believe that it contributed to the eradication of the Orang Laut's way of life. How do you feel about that?
Of course, when I first learned about it, I was a bit upset,
Of course.
shooting settlements.
Of course.
But already they had a lot of difficulties by the time the British came to carry out their traditional form of living.
Right.
Do I regret that sense of culture loss? I think I'm fortunate enough to at least experience a little bit of it when my grandma was still alive and she could tell me the stories and talk about how it used to be.
So after speaking to Sharom, it was very apparent to me that both the Diana and the pirates had different purpose. So to me, it was just a clash of ideas. And unfortunately, this clash turned out to be an all-out war, right? With obviously a losing party. And to me, all wars are ugly. Not all wars are justified. Since meeting Sharon, my concept has sort of changed a bit. So instead of doing a landscape of the first encounter of the Diana by pirates, I decided to just present the ship, the Diana, with the pirates on it, riding the boat, going to a destination unknown. I wanted to show sort of like a reconciliation between these two stories. And there are no weapons, there's no cannons, because again, I'm completely over that narrative of war and destruction. And I just wanted to show a simpler version of what you can actually do with a ship. So right now, after this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it with a jigsaw cutter. And then after that, I will paint them and draw the boat in and draw the characters in as well. I think I definitely came a long way since I started. Me being Singaporean, Malay of Burmese descent, it does play a part when it came to creating these works, simply because of the fact that I see a lot of myself in this kind of stories. I can't help but to want to try to stick up for this so-called pirates. It'd be definitely great if people can look at the work and find a bit of themselves in it. It'd be great if they could look at it and question the influences of their own colonial history and how that impacted them.
Because what we read from the history books may not always be the full story.
And then from there, they will be able to learn it for themselves, so that's always the hope.